Good evening. It's Monday, the 14th of December. It's the eve of a motion that will be coming before the Dáil tomorrow afternoon to ratify CETA, the EU-Canadian trade deal. And I'm here tonight to discuss this issue with members of the Stop CETA Alliance of Ireland. Attracta Bhroin is the environmental law officer with the IEN, that is the Irish Environmental Network. Seamus Maye is the founder and chairperson of the International Small Business Alliance. And finally, Kat Kent is the former president of the ICSA, the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association. CETA is going to have huge ramifications for Ireland if it's ratified. And we'll be discussing the implications of this with our panel tonight. But first, here's a short video clip. Matthias Kelly is a senior counsel and Queen's Counsel and an expert on the Irish Constitution. And this short video clip outlines his position. It was recorded in 2017.
My name is Matthias Kelly. I'm a senior counsel here in Dublin and a Queen's Counsel in London. CETA will result in an investment tribunal, giving them a completely different legal structure. Matters that otherwise would have been resolved before the Irish courts will, if this is implemented, no longer be resolved by the Irish courts. It will be by the supranational tribunal. I think the CETA proposal does give rise to constitutional issues in Ireland. I say that because Article 34, Sub-Article 1 of the Constitution vests the power to dispense justice in the Irish domestic courts. You see, the constitutional position in Ireland is that all power flows from the people, not the other way around as it is, for example, in the United Kingdom. Here, powers cannot be given away, which the people have entrusted to the various organs of government without the consent of the people. The government and the Oireachtas cannot give away power entrusted to them, and in this case to the courts, without the approval of the people as expressed in a referendum. Put another way, before CETA can be implemented, in my view, it's straightforward. A referendum is needed to give away the judicial power that this would involve.
Matthias Kelly, Senior Counsel, Queen's Counsel, and that clip comes from a film recorded by Raj Whelan, a guest we had here on the Irish Inquiry a few weeks ago, and it was made in conjunction with AFRE. If I could go first to you, Attracta, maybe you might explain briefly to our viewers who know nothing about CETA what it is and why you are so concerned about its possible ratification.
Thank you very much, Anna, and thanks for this opportunity just to just alert people to what's actually happening. But if I could just first clarify, the Irish Environmental Network isn't part of the Stop CETA Alliance. I just owe that as a duty to our members. The situation with the CETA is basically it's a free trade agreement, and many people in Ireland know that we're a small open economy and that trade is good for Ireland. It means lots of jobs for people, and it's very important to us. So it's not an issue with trade per se, but it is a case of not trade at any price. And unfortunately, the EU-Canada deal, which was negotiated effectively sort of started back over 12 years ago, is now a really out of date type of agreement for the world that we live in today. And some people might wonder what is all the fuss about now, because they might remember, back in 2017, when Matthias would have spoken, and indeed many others, that there was a lot of kerfuffle around decisions and conclusions of negotiations, and Wallonia expressing extraordinary concerns as a regional area of Belgium. And then that there was big signatures and signings, and things started to come into effect. So what's happening now? Well, basically what's happened is the part of the agreement effectively has come into effect under a situation called provisional application. And now, and there have been benefits associated with that, and there have been issues associated with that. So there are different views in relation to the pros and cons of where we are today. But tomorrow, what would happen would be that the Dáil, and only the Dáil, would be voting to ratify the CETA agreement, which would mean that they would be voting yes to the very controversial is the investor protection, which rise to these powers basically where corporations can opt to step outside of the national court system and have their claims for damages basically heard in a specialist tribunal. And those claims can arise in the context where they wish to argue that under the terms of the agreement that their profitability has been impacted by decisions on policy or regulation taken by our government, or indeed it could be at EU level or against any of the member states once all of the member states have ratified the agreement and that end up coming into place. And I suppose the fundamental issue is we're just coming, out of one really significant banking crisis, which has really impacted our economy. We've had the huge shock to our economy of the COVID pandemic, and indeed to our society. And on top of that, now we have all of the uncertainties of Brexit. And what this leaves us is open to a whole range of claims that could arise from foreign direct investment. And the irony of it is that in the first place, there's no need to rush this vote. There's loads of other countries that actually haven't ratified this part of the agreement yet. And what's really alarming is that I literally just stumbled across the motion when I was watching the schedule on Friday evening, and many people, even within the Oireachtas, weren't actually even fully aware of it, and wider civil society. And there have been millions of people marching in Europe, and many organisations expressing concerns for many years on CETA. And this came as a complete surprise that Ireland was going to move to the next stage. And I think that's what's really most egregious, because there will be people, as in any debate, on either side of the equation, arguing that fears are misfounded, or that people don't properly understand, on both sides of the equation. And the issue is that on something with this really big significance, there should be proper, informed public debate and scrutiny before we make a big decision like this, because for Ireland, this is the first time that we would be really signing up to an agreement of this nature with these specialist terms. We have under one agreement called the Energy Charter Treaty, and that's causing enough trouble as it is. But with this one, it would be much more expansive and the exposure would be much more significant. And I suppose for Ireland, why would we? I mean, that's the crazy thing. We've been able to attract a really high level of foreign direct investment really successfully without actually ever having subscribed to these agreements in the past. So we really stand up there as the example, whereas some of our colleagues in the European Union have signed up to these agreements in different ways. We haven't. So basically, it really begs the question that we should not rush into it in the first instance. There should be proper transparency, accountability, debate, scrutiny, consultation, you name it, before we do this. And I think that's really what's appalling. And I think there's been a lot of alarm and outrage in the way that this was being pushed through. And like just today, I just literally in the last hour or so, I've emailed on to An Taoiseach, An Taoiseach, and Minister Eamon Ryan, and indeed all the TDs and senators and the MEPs for Ireland, a petition signed by over 100 organisations, both in Ireland and across the EU, basically scandalising what's happening here in terms of the way that this vote is actually happening, and expressing concern and urging the government basically to defer the motion to basically change the order of business for tomorrow. And it's quite shocking that as we speak this evening, I'm not in a position to confirm that those voices, those calls, that huge outcry from civil society, which has been on Facebook, on Twitter, with people ringing their emails, or ringing and emailing their TDs and senators, they're just not listening, and that's what's really alarming. And
Okay.
sorry, that was a long answer, but
No, that's okay. I know, Attracta, that you would be to the fore as an expert on the whole trade agreement. And I got in contact with a number of TDs today, and I was being accused of being quite alarmist. They didn't see any problem or any concern around having CETA ratified. And they just didn't have any concept or understanding that the Irish governments into the future could actually be sued in a foreign court by multinationals for loss of profits. That didn't seem to register with them, and even then when I finally did get that through to them, they seemed to think, well, that's not a big problem. Justice will be seen to be done, and it will all be transparent. So I then talked to a number of activists, and nobody actually seems to know the full details of that ICS, that investor court system. Is it known, the details around that, or is it a work in progress?
I think there's still an awful lot of details to be ironed out in relation to it. And I suppose just to clarify, a lot of people would be familiar with the term ISDS, and that's investment settlement dispute. And there was such an absolute outcry from civil society across Europe when these mechanisms were being included in new trade deals that the EU has been developing in recent years, and negotiating, that the EU undertook to supposedly reform the mechanism. And to my mind, one of the things that they did was they stuck court in the title. Well, you can stick court in the title, but it doesn't make it a court. And you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. And the simple fact of the matter is there are certain things that we expect of a court in terms of the level of independence, that concept of equality before the law, etc. And that's fundamentally not what you get with ICS. For example, it's just a one-way system. Corporations can sue our government, but our government can't sue those corporations in the same mechanism. And there are a lot of concerns still remaining in relation to the panel of arbitrators that would sit in adjudication on what happens after their period of office is up. And there's still an awful lot of concerns there. And I suppose the issue is that it is really alarming that there are people who would be voting on this tomorrow who don't fully appreciate that in the context of the Singapore trade agreement, the Court of Justice was asked to give a ruling in relation to the implications on how an agreement like the Singapore trade agreement could be concluded, whether it fell entirely within the competence of the EU, or did each of the member states also separately and individually have to make a decision on it. And the Court of Justice's ruling was absolutely unequivocal because of the extraordinary and profound significance of the rights that the member states were giving, whereby they were signing off that investors could choose to take their claims outside of the jurisdiction of our national courts, that warranted a decision by the national court, by the national parliaments. And that's why there is that individual ratification. So it is absolutely clear. I mean, Chapter 8 of the CETA agreement is effectively in those respects the same as in the Singapore agreement, and that's why it requires to be ratified. So the whole issue, as I said again, is the need to have proper transparency, to have proper discussion, and where everybody's concerns can be heard, clarified, questioned, answered. I remember being extremely alarmed when I started looking into this originally to find out that then Minister Richard Bhroin, Minister for Trade at the time, had many years ago been one of 14 ministers for trade who had lobbied Commissioner Malmström to include ISDS style mechanism, even the really, really bad form of this in the TTIP negotiations. And when I, in a personal capacity, with a small NGO that I work with, did access to information on the environment request, which is sort of a special type of like an FOI, but just with slightly different terms and provisions and powers, I found out that there was virtually no cost-benefit analysis in relation to the impact of that, really no policy backup. Now, they've tidied up their homework, but on that basis and on that really, really inadequate level of scrutiny, that was the basis on which Ireland was signing up and pushing the deal at EU level. And that's really concerning. And tomorrow, the motion that will go before the Dáil is under Article 29.5.2 of the Constitution, which is specifically requires a motion before the Dáil to agree a deal such as CETA because there is a charge upon the state. Now that's from the Constitution. Because there is a charge upon the state, it requires to be passed, and the motion that's been drafted refers to Article 29.5.2. So these are very, very serious issues, and
yes,
very, very large scale debate on this and consultation. The implications are profound, just also in terms of just the regulatory chill effect, where there's that uncertainty and there's that, could we be sued? Will we be sued? Won't we be sued? That has a paralysing effect. It's known as regulatory chill because governments become too frightened to regulate. And just think about this year in the context of the awful things that have happened with the COVID pandemic and the extraordinary controls that governments have had to exercise. On a day when the death toll in Italy surpassed that of anywhere else in the world from the COVID pandemic, there was lawyers advertising and writing articles about the ability to sue governments for the effects of the controls that they were implementing to control the spread of the pandemic because of the impact of their profitability. And that's really, really chilling, at a time when society really needs to pull together, that there is that appetite among some very unscrupulous corporations and lawyers to basically go through agreements and trawl them for every loophole, for every possibility.
Okay.
And that's the problem. Grey is a lawyer's favourite colour.
Yeah. I know, Attracta, that you're pressed for time. You have a meeting to attend to. Before you go, to our viewers who are listening in, what final word do you have to say to them?
Whatever your view on this, we live in a democracy, and that democracy is based on trust. And trust has got to mean that there has got to be really transparency and accountability. And there hasn't been proper transparency and accountability and visibility around this matter and why our Oireachtas members would vote one way or the other tomorrow. And I mean, that is really ultimately what many organisations, like the organisation and the member groups that I work with in the environmental pillar, many NGOs, many like ICTU, the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, wrote an extraordinarily strong letter Patricia King sent to all of the deputies in the Dáil today, calling for the vote to be deferred, expressing the serious concerns that they had for workers' rights and a whole range of issues. There are healthcare organisations, there's loads of different organisations writing in. There are global justice groups who are really concerned about the impact on climate change and on on other nations. And basically what we're asking people to do is to reach out, to talk to your local politicians, to pick up the phone and to tweet, to Facebook, to do whatever it is that you do, to email, and just to express your concern that there should be, people's concerns should be respected. There should be proper consultation. The vote tomorrow must be postponed, and right. Really postpone the CETA vote. Postpone the CETA.
Right. Okay. Well, Attracta, I just want to thank you sincerely for your huge contribution to this issue. You have been working for many, many, many years on this issue. I know that you are, since you discovered on Friday evening that this motion was going before the Dáil tomorrow, I know that you have been working practically round the clock on this issue. And I really appreciate the fact that you have taken the time to be with us tonight. And thank you so much for that, Attracta.
Not at all. And I really appreciate the opportunity, Anna, and just a big shout out to everybody who's responded and everybody who's engaged in this. It's just been just extraordinary. You know, it's always the time in the darkest crisis and the darkest hours that you just become inspired at the way people respond.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping that politicians will listen to that. I mean, it's a remarkable thing. I think it's a tribute to our democracy if our politicians listen. And I really hope that they will. And thank you for, you know, giving us the opportunity just to make that further call. I mean, I'm really delighted that you have representatives here now from small business, which is so important, you know, to the lifeblood of Ireland, and also from the farmers. I mean, it's really brilliant. And that's been what's unique about the coalition we've had. We've had unions, we've had farmers, we've had NGOs, we've had business standing shoulder to shoulder expressing concerns. So, and you've been a huge part of that. So thanks a million, Anna. Good evening.
Thank you so much, Attracta. And we'll catch up with you again, and hopefully we will have good news tomorrow that this will be postponed. Okay.
Just hang up.
Okay. Seamus Maye is the founder and chairperson of the International Small Business Alliance and an expert on corporation law. Seamus, you have been campaigning for years against the CETA. Why do you, as a representative of small businesses across Europe, why do you have concerns about it?
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. It'd be very hard to follow Attracta. I take my hat off to her as usual. But if I could give some little perspective on it, first and foremost, it is absolutely disgraceful that the three government party leaders, Leo Varadkar, Micheál Martin and Eamon Ryan, tried to sneak this vote through tomorrow without anybody knowing. I mean, we're talking here about corporations, we're talking about big business, and unfortunately mainstream media has become very, very captured by the corporate lobby, which means that we're not seeing, and ordinary people that we're trying to reach out to tonight are not actually reading about CETA. They're not reading about all the damaging aspects of CETA. People just simply don't know. So this is a great opportunity maybe to say a few words. Now, I am, as you say, I've been involved in small and medium business for many, many years. Certainly, we have the International Small Business Alliance now for nearly 20 years. And, you know, I travel over and back to Brussels quite a bit on various business and various lobbying. And what I see, particularly over the last 15, 20 years, is that, you know, global lawyers and lobbyists for global corporations, they have erected a ring of steel around the European Commission and the European Parliament. And it's whatever they say goes. They have the say. And, you know, this, for me, the biggest objection I have to this CETA as it currently stands, and Attracta has covered it, is what was called the ISDS, the Investor Court Dispute Settlement. And as Attracta said, yes, they did change the name, and it's now the Investor Court Settlement. But why do we need a corporate court? Why, if there's a dispute, can corporations not just go to the High Court or the Court of Appeal or the European Court of Justice, the same as everybody else? It's not a great system, certainly not a great system that we have for small business, but it's there. But why do we have to set up? I mean, for example, just say the government moved to I know we have banned fracking, but I'm just taking it as an example. So if corporations, global corporations, came into Ireland and they looked for licenses for fracking, and then the government turned and banned fracking, these corporations can go to their own corporate courts, and I mean they would be kangaroo courts as far as I'm concerned, and they can sue Ireland. I mean, CETA is giving away our sovereignty. It's giving away the last piece of sovereignty we have. And we're like these faceless corporations, you know, why and who's pulling the strings of government? And let me tell you that I know, and we all probably know from the previous lobbying that we have done. I hate that word lobbying because it implies that we're getting paid. I don't think anybody involved in this campaign have been paid for anything. But, you know, Fianna Fáil, let me tell you that Fianna Fáil are against CETA, and particularly the bad parts, and particularly these kangaroo courts. And I'll tell you why we know that. because we met back in, I think it was in 2017, we met Eamon O'Keefe, Niall Collins and Robert Troy, three outstanding Fianna Fáil politicians, and they were convinced and they were totally with us. They agreed that the CETA could not go ahead as stands, and particularly this ISDS. But what happened? Why did Fianna Fáil change? Well, I'll tell you what happened. Micheál Martin was the leader of Fianna Fáil, and Micheál Martin would not entertain his own TDs. They went to him and he said he was not for turning on CETA. So yeah, we have to appeal to all Fianna Fáil people out there, be they councillors, be they supporters, be they TDs, senators, whatever, because the real Fianna Fáil people will not support CETA. They can't. And
And Seamus, can I interrupt you there? What do you make of Eamon Ryan, who actually came out with us, the Stop CETA Alliance, back in 2017 and campaigned with us vigorously against the CETA? And he was part of the cabinet that decided 2 weeks ago that this motion was to go before the Dáil tomorrow. Have you any comment to make on that?
Well, I do, like all the political leaders, like all the parties, I watch them very closely. I've had reason to interact with Eamon Ryan quite a lot over the years. And for me, the jury is out. How can Eamon Ryan, as leader of the Greens, how can he possibly vote for CETA? How can he possibly vote for all this corporate control? There's a huge question mark over food quality. There's going to be a huge question mark over employee welfare, a huge question mark over the environment, and these kangaroo courts. Now, that says it all. And we have interacted with Eamon Ryan on other areas such as white collar crime and other corruption. And there's a no-show. Eamon Ryan, and he's the leader, and he is not showing any interest. And coincidentally, he's the Minister for Communications now, which puts him over the post offices. And he's not making a lot of sense with regard to our post office network. There are probably up to 600 more post offices going to start closing from next July. So we're talking in all of these things, including CETA, we're talking about the fabric of our society. We're talking about our socio-economy. And like Eamon Ryan needs to step up. Now, I understand fully that there's a lot of TDs in the Green Party and senators and councillors that are bitterly opposed to CETA, and for the right reasons. But if CETA goes through, if the Green Party allows CETA to go through, for me that's the end of the Green Party, because there's no reason for their existence anymore if the Tea Party is sellout. So I would really appeal to all Green Party members, all Fianna Fáil members, and indeed, I'm sure there are people within Fine Gael that are very unhappy with what their leaders have been doing over the last 10 years with regard to this corporate takeover and the corporate supremacy. So we're at a huge crisis. And let me say one more thing. I went over to America last year, and I visited and met with a lot of farmers, poultry farmers, pig farmers, beef farmers. And, let's not be under any illusion that the American or the Canadian farmers are going to take the bit off the Irish farmers' table. That's not what's happening. What's happening is the American, if you let me finish, the American corporations are taking the money. They're standing, walking, squeezing their farmers just the same as our farmers in Ireland are being squeezed. And it's the same. Sorry about that for going on.
No, you're okay. I just that I feel that I want to pick up on that point now that you're making, because we have Pat Kent with us, who is the former president of the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association, and Pat has campaigned against the CETA over many years. I suppose quite unique as a farm leader in Ireland to come out so strongly against the agreement. Pat, just to pick up there on Seamus's point about the effects that this CETA is going to have on Irish farmers.
A huge danger to Irish farmers, Anna, because the cost of production in Canada would be much lower. The standards are much lower. The way the food is produced, to use genetically modified organisms and hormones and growth promoters and antibiotics in feed.
I think we're losing Pat there. His signal is going.
In that, they just shoot the wildlife off the land, be it elk and bears and so on and so forth, and just further expand like they're doing with the tar sands. And, they just don't care for the environment so much, unlike the Europeans, who are much more stringent and much, more historic and smaller scale, which result, we like to protect our farmers here, smaller scale, historic, higher quality food. Our consumers are very conscientious in food flavor, quality, the health-giving properties of grass-fed beef and so on. I don't think we've been selling our beef adequately at all here. We've been just selling it as beef rather than grass-fed. The main portion of the diet here is grass, unlike in the States where it's corn and soy that's grown using lots of chemicals. And as a result, it's a totally different product. Large corporates, of course, are pushing for this. Seamus and Attracta have explained very, very well the dangers of allowing the ICS mechanism to take over and force little countries like ours to accept product and to seek compensation if they don't get their profits, even if they don't ever intend to come here and do that and invoke that mechanism whereby they can threaten us and sue us and so on. But look, we've got, farming here is just barely on subsistence level incomes at the minute. It's quite in a perilous state to open up and reduce tariffs or eliminate tariffs to Canada. And I must say, in the past, I've not only campaigned against CETA, but I've also campaigned against TTIP. President Trump kicked at the touch the TTIP deal when he came into power, but we have a major problem now with Tom Vilsack taking over, possibly with Joe Biden, and that will threaten us even further because the TTIP is an American trade deal. It's very, very dangerous. CETA can be construed as TTIP by the back door also. There's a lot of cross-border trade between Canada and the United States. But also, I've campaigned against the Mercosur deal, which is very, very dangerous as well for Irish farmers. These deals should not be ratified without thorough consultation, and I believe they should not be ratified at all. But the danger to Irish farmers, and Irish farming, and European farmers and consumers also, particularly consumers, I think we've got to be always on the side of the consumer because, you take the levels of cheap junk food that's available in the States and they can bring it in here and from Canada as well. Levels of obesity and ill health, and diabetes and so on and so forth is off the Richter scale. We're following closely behind, but we've got to get our politicians to make sure this deal is not ratified. Okay,
and I know, Pat, that you are very, very passionate about preserving the small family farm, which is at the heart of the fabric of rural Ireland, and it is the best way that we have of producing nutritious food that's life-enhancing, and I suppose it's a win-win all around if we can protect the small family farm producing really high-quality food. Do you think that the small family farm can withstand the effects of CETA if it's ratified, coupled with Brexit?
No, I don't think, we're in a very perilous state with Brexit also, for our exports, and we're very dependent on the UK market for our beef exports in particular. To combine that at this time, it would be very irresponsible of any politician to ratify this, and I think the electorate would be taking into consideration that at the next opportune time as well. And we've got to, because it not alone does it put our farmers in a very perilous state, but it puts the whole rural economy and small villages, towns, and so on and so forth. They all, there's a spin-off from a thriving farming population, and we just can't afford to take any chances there.
Okay. Well, I know now that that time is against us, and we have to wind up here. So I'm going to go back to each of you, I suppose, for a final word to our listeners. Seamus, what have you to say to our listeners tuned in this evening? There's, what is it? It's 9 o'clock now, so 24, it's about 36 hours to this vote tomorrow evening. What have you to say to people that are tuned our way this evening, Seamus?
Yeah, well, just to appeal to anybody and everybody, whether you're politically affiliated or not, to get onto your local TD, even get onto your councillor, get onto your senator, get onto your MEP, and oppose this. Oppose this. This is so damaging, so dangerous. And the Green Party and Eamon Ryan were wholeheartedly against this. And they have turned. Sinn Féin are against it. All of the smaller parties are against it. So, we've got to appeal. It's Micheál Martin in Fianna Fáil as the main man, and Eamon Ryan, the Greens, and we have to talk to Fine Gael as well as we can if anyone is capable of talking to Fine Gael. But it's an appeal between now and tomorrow to contact everybody you possibly can and have this vote at the very least postponed.
Okay, and over to you, Pat, final word.
Absolutely. Same as Seamus, you've got to contact your politicians. You've got to make sure this is not ratified and it's postponed and examined totally in detail. Big corporates are pushing this. A lot of politicians, unfortunately, are not fully aware of the possible consequences. Like, our sovereignty has already been eroded on many occasions in the past. And one of our main export things is beef and lamb and our meat products and so on, and even our dairy. And the dangers there are just not, it doesn't bear thinking about. We've given away our oil and we've given away so many of our resources in the past. And we don't know how to dilute the standards either from a consumer perspective. But as Seamus says, it's imperative that we talk to our politicians in the next few hours. Okay.
Well, I want to thank both of you, Pat and Seamus, for joining us tonight. And I want to thank Attracta in her absence. A big thank you to Stephen Kerr and his team at the Irish Inquiry for making this live stream possible. Can you please go to the Irish Inquiry website? There's a drop-down box. If you can in any way help us either with your skills, your videography skills, editing skills, so on, or if you want to make a donation towards the upkeep of the website and so on, you can do so. There is just a very small window of opportunity left now to lobby our politicians, particularly the Green politicians and Fianna Fáil, members of the Fianna Fáil party. Lobby them. It beholds all of us now to take a huge stand on this issue. We owe it to our children and our grandchildren. Future generations will not forgive us if we let this go by without us taking a stand on it. CETA is trending on Twitter now, and the power of social media is enormous. So you're obviously viewing this now on some kind of a device, perhaps a phone, and just take the next couple of minutes to take the trouble of contacting your local politicians. If you go to my Facebook page, I have a post there from earlier today with a list of the email addresses of the Green Party TDs, and you can copy and paste the email that I sent to them if you don't want to write your own email. It'll only take less than 5 minutes, but it will be really worth it. I want to thank you so much for watching, and hopefully by tomorrow afternoon a decision will be made to postpone the vote on this toxic trade deal. Banach de Orif Golair. Iowa.